Welcome to Stop the Fight, episode 35. And today, we are going over last week's fight with Shakur Stevenson and this weekend's action. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong man, good boy, just...
All right, let's start with the last weekend. Okay, let's talk about the betting angle first. Now, you guys knew my play. You take the under, and I took Jamal Herring. Now, of course, Jamal Herring did not win. I did say that I did not think he was going to win, but given how wide the odds were, you always got a peek. Now, again, in this case, Shakur Stevenson was so much better than expected that, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have even lost the 30, 40 bucks or whatever it was that I put on Herring. We're talking about a very special talent, but the under 10.5 held. The fight was stopped at 1 minute and 29 seconds in the 10th round. Guys, again, remember 10.5 means you have to go to the 11th round. That was a nice little pickup for us there. I think it was plus 150 or something like that. I don't remember. Nice little pickup. That's your hedge. That's kind of how you try to kind of watch your own back, right? Everyone was greedy. Look, as a bettor, you're always greedy. That was greedy. Me taking Jamal Herring, even though I openly say I believe Shakur Stevenson is going to win, is a greedy play. What else can it be? But me knowing my own greed, I also use a little bit of a boxing mind. You want to try and cover many of the bases, and taking the under 10.5 in this case worked us out. Remember, my reasoning behind this is that on the off shot that Shakur Stevenson is so good, he may actually get Herring out of there early. And on the off shot that Shakur Stevenson was really bothered by taller fighters, such as Nakatia from the previous fight, then maybe Herring can actually get the KO. And if Herring gets the KO relatively early, again, remember guys, 10.5 rounds, that's practically the whole fight. 10.5 rounds means at 11:30, at 1 minute 30 seconds in the 11th round. That's pretty much the whole fight. Basically taking the under 10.5 when you have 10.5 as the under, that basically covers the whole fight. If anyone wins in that stoppage, you win on that bet, especially if you're getting kind of underdog money on it, like we did at plus 150 or whatever the hell it was. That's a good way to kind of cover yourself. So I'm thinking, if Shakur Stevenson's much better than we anticipate, he may get the stoppage over Herring. And if Herring, can stop him, we win on both ends of the bet, which, is a really fat stack of cash that comes our way. But, we did not win on the Herring. Shakur Stevenson had proven himself to be quite an unbelievable fighter at 130. You know who he kind of reminds me of? Obviously, they have different attributes, but a little bit like Adrian Broner. Back when Adrian Broner was at these lower weight classes. Now, why am I saying Adrian Broner? Because neither Shakur Stevenson nor Adrian Broner, they're very gifted with their hands, but their feet. Shakur Stevenson doesn't move too much. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. I don't know what his foot speed really is. He didn't have to use it much over here. He was kind of outboxing Herring the entire time at a distance, just outlanding him. He looked decent on his feet, but you're not going to say he's like a foot speedy. This isn't Lomachenko in there. So in a way, he reminds me of Adrian Broner, who kind of sit a little bit, take short steps forward, short steps back, side to side, but not do too much work in that sense, or too much work, too much speed, not that much speed on him. And that's what it kind of looked like on the feet, but on the hands, oh boy, were they blistering. Was the pocket defense good? Now, I don't know if Andre Ward is working in that corner, but I think he was. Or at one point he has worked with him. Now, you can definitely see how Shakur Stevenson's guard, you can see what he's learned a little bit from Andre Ward. This is going to be a tough fighter to beat. And guys, just seeing that, no way am I taking Oscar Valdez to beat Shakur Stevenson. I don't know if that fight is next, but no way, especially after the kind of trouble that Oscar Valdez had against, what's his name, Conceição. No way. This tall, lanky. I mean, again, Shakur doesn't fight like Conceição, but nonetheless, the speed on the hands are going to be bigger. The shots are straight. He knew how to loop them around Herring's defense when Herring himself would keep a high guard on. He was much stronger on the inside than I thought he would be. He looked like the total package, except he has enough power right now, but any weight class higher up than here, and I believe Shakur Stevenson won't even have respectable power, and I believe any fights with Gervonta Davis, Shakur Stevenson would have to box the fight of his life to keep to not get knocked out, because he did stop Herring, but Herring is not particularly a what do you call it? He's not a particularly like a durable guy. He looked a little bit aged in there. He's been stopped before. I already told you, against Denis Shafikov. He's a good fighter, but he himself is not a guy with much power. Coming in at only 42% knockout. A little bit older, 35. This is a guy who's I believe is a good fighter, but just was maybe two levels below. I mean, I think I gave him one round in the entire fight, and it was a debatable round. That's how much of a wash this was through 11 rounds. Well, 10 actually. Through the 10 rounds, it was quite a one-sided. I mean, I thought it actually could have been stopped earlier. Herring was obviously not gonna try and quit, but the stoppage was good. He didn't need that. He was getting hit. He was bleeding from his ear. I actually think Shakur Stevenson could have even stepped it up earlier. I thought within the first 2 or 3 rounds, I was like, oh boy, did I mess up on taking Herring, because within the first 2 rounds, where you would expect someone like Herring, who's going to pressure him, to really get on him, he was getting abused in the first 3 rounds by a guy who was smaller, but who was so much quicker, so much sharper, and felt the boxing distance so much better. And guys, I'm telling you, I'm not joking, but this is truly a very special fighter at 130 pounds. And I just can't imagine, like, Valdez, especially after the kind of trouble he had against Conceição, him. I can see him troubling, but I cannot see him beating him. I can see this being something like a 117, 111, 116, 112 type of fight. He'd have to really, the thing is, he has to really get on top of Stevenson and really sit on there. He can do it, of course. I don't think this is going to be as much of a blowout as the Herring fight, but I do believe for sure that Stevenson should be favored in a fight going forward against anybody at 130 pounds. He really dismantled Herring, and I know at one point they were saying Carl Frampton versus Stevenson. Oh boy, that would have been a nightmare matchup for Frampton. Maybe in his prime, it could have been competitive for a little while over there, but we see that Stevenson at 24, like, this is a young kid. Like I said, his problem will be is that he doesn't have natural power. And I don't think he'll get it. And as his body grows, if he goes up to 135, he's going to have big trouble there, I think. Guys like Teofimo and Lomachenko, he could maybe beat a Lomachenko simply because of the boxing, because, Lomachenko himself is not a power guy. But, Lomachenko has dealt with speed before, and Gary Russell. And Gary Russell was a little bit faster than Stevenson was back then when Lomachenko fought him, especially on the hands. I don't think Gary Russell was good as a boxer, as refined as Shakur Stevenson is, even at this young age. But nonetheless, this was quite a tremendous showing for Shakur Stevenson, and I guess congratulations to the young man. And Herring, like, he shouldn't hang his head down, because he did everything he could. Sometimes just in boxing, the other guy is just better than you in most attributes, and there's nothing you can do but try and do your best and not give up until just try your best. This is a prize fight. This is what happens. Sometimes you're going to run into a guy who's completely better than you. And that's what happened with Herring. Okay, now let's move on to what's happening this weekend. I want to talk about 2 fights. Well, really, I want to talk about, just 2 fights. There's going to be a lot. There's a lot of fights, guys, on tomorrow. A lot of cards tomorrow. And I'm not going to talk about any of those. But you have Telemundo cards. You have ESPN Plus cards, but what I want to talk about specifically is the Saturday action, and there's the Zone fights in London. I think it's in London. I'm almost sure it's in London, But I want to talk about the Jamal James and Jaron Ennis card that we're going to get on Showtime. Of course, there's a Jose Zapata fight on ESPN, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I just want to talk about the Jamal James and Jaron Ennis fights. So Jamal James is 27-1, 12 knockouts, no defeats, and he's going up against Rajab Butayev, right? Who is an undefeated, I guess, Russian. Not an ethnic Russian, I don't think. A fighter from Russia who now trains in Brooklyn, New York. He is 13-0 with 10 knockouts. Call him the Piton. And he's 5'10" to Jamal James 6'2". Now, Jamal James' lone loss came already almost 6 years ago to Yuriandis Ugas. And we just actually saw Ugas do a little bit of something, right? Y'all remember the Pacquiao fight? Okay. Again, I'm not trying to say that that's an acceptable loss, but recently he's got wins over Thomas Duome and Antonio DeMarco. Antonio DeMarco, again, for me, is always memorable because Antonio DeMarco is the guy that wound up fighting Valero. Was one of those Valero victims, Edwin Valero, if you remember him. He had a string of knockouts, undefeated 26-0, 26 knockout fighter who eventually, unfortunately, lost his mind. Well, unfortunately for his wife and kids, wound up killing his wife and children. Again, horrible story, but I'll always remember DeMarco being one of his victims, and I always wonder how good he could have actually been. And I remember DeMarco was one of those guys that I looked at. DeMarco had a pretty decent career himself, but it doesn't tell us how good Edmund would have been. Unfortunately, DeMarco is not an all-time great or a Hall of Fame fighter. He is a good fighter, but neither. Again, that's a little tangential. So he's fighting against Rajab Butayev. Now, the fight he had against Thomas Duome was relatively competitive. Jamal James won that fight 117, 111, 115, 113, and 116, 112. Now, why this is important? Well, Rajab or Butayev wound up having a very close and competitive fight. Well, not very close. Let's say competitive fight against Alexander Besputin, who is a pretty good fighter. Again, it was then ruled a no. He lost the fight, but it was ruled a no contest after we found a little bit of the sauce in the samples of Besputin. So what are we looking at here? Well, we have a guy who's a little bit more powerful but a little bit smaller in Butayev against a guy who's a little bit lankier, a little bit quicker, but not as powerful in Jamal James. The casinos kind of have the odds pretty well here, -110 for both. So they believe this is an even fight. I too believe this is an even fight. It'll be interesting to see how they do. But you have a nice under 10.5 here. Now, of course, if Jamal James is winning, he's probably going to box to a decision. But this tall, lanky frame, if Butayev can get on top of it, I believe we have a shot for a KO, as Butayev is a much more heavy-handed fighter. His only problem is his level of opposition face is quite paltry. Outside of Besputin, it's not particularly. It's kind of literally who all the way through in his 13 fights. So again, I like me personally. Again, guys, this is not financial advice. You are all grown people. You make your own decisions. You make your own bets. I like the under 10.5 here. As a matter of fact, I think Butayev wins. He probably stops him. I've seen a lot of these kind of very lanky fighters. Something about tall, lanky fighters and getting knocked out just consistently rings in my mind, even though I know it's not always true. Virgil Hill against Roy Jones and stuff like that. Like, just it seems like these taller fighters, the 6'2", this fight's taking place at what? I think it's at 147. Maybe it's not 140. I think it's at 147. And yeah, it is at 147. Like, that's 6'2" on 147. We're talking about stick thin. So, like I said, I just, for some reason in my mind, I don't have anything really to go this on. Again, Butayev has very limited opposition outside of Besputin, and Jamal James, he's fought DeMarco, who he beat by unanimous decision. He obviously beat unanimous decision Thomas Duome. And, so a little bit better opposition phase, but this tall frame with low KO percentages, to me, that it just visually seems like it's a KO waiting to happen. Again, not financial advice. Y'all make your own bets. Let's move on to the fight that I thought should be the kind of the main event, but it's not. This is the undercard, I guess, of the Jamal James fight, which is weird, as I believe Jaron Ennis is the star here, or the main attraction. And Jaron Ennis, 27-0, 25 knockouts, 24 years old, fighting against aforementioned Thomas Duome. Now, guys, this is this is one of those fights where I think this is going to be a little bit of a wash here. I think Duome, he's 25-5, 1 draw, 16 wins by knockout, 2 defeats by way of knockout. Lost 3 of his past 5 fights. Only one had a draw with Jesse Vargas, majority decision. Yeah, this is. I don't know if you guys have seen the Jaron Ennis Sergey Lipinets fight from the previous fight that he had back in April. Yeah, he demolished Lipinets, and Lipinets is not a bad fighter. I believe he was much, much better at 140. I don't believe he's anywhere near the same fighter at 147, Lipinets. Nonetheless, Jaron Ennis really put a beating on him, and he has already a lot of it. For a 24-year-old kid, just to give you an example, what's his name? Stevenson had only 17 fights at the same age. Jaron Ennis is 27. He's been fighting a lot. He's been sharp. He looked great in there against Lipinets. It almost looked like Lipinets was a stationary target. I also believe Lipinets has questionable footwork, and his balance is weird. I know he was a kickboxer, and that may affect it. But, go watch that. Go watch the Jaron Ennis Lipinets fight. Go watch the what do you call it? The Jamal James Duorme fight, and tell me that Duorme stands any shot against Jaron Ennis. He doesn't. All right, let's look at the odds. Now, the odds are ridiculous. Minus 4,000 for Ennis, plus 1,300 for Duorme. I'm not even going to spend $5 on Duorme. I just do not believe I believe that's how wide the gap is. Like I said, if I had known Stevenson was going to show up as good as he did, I wouldn't have even put the whatever money I put on Herring to even see. I really believe this is going to be that wide. And again, the total rounds, the over-under it's not great. Over 4.5 at minus 115, under 4.5 at minus 105. So under 4.5 for pretty much even money, and over 4.5 for slightly less than even money. I don't know if that's really a betting kind of fight for me, to tell you the truth. I don't like it. If you take, there's almost, like, if you think the fight can go the distance and Ennis can win by decision, which, he's been taken twice, is plus 600. I think if anything, like, that's a decent bet compared to everything else. I just the over-under is too close to for me. Like 4.5 rounds as the middle of the 5th round. I just don't know. I truthfully don't know. And obviously, of course, you can get insane odds on Duorme by decision at plus 25, which is crazy. 25 times your money. Again, this is going to be another showcase fight for Ennis. I want to see him. The Lipinets was a pretty big step up, by the way. That was a legit fight. But I want to see him. I want to see him now really kind of get at someone at 147, because again, this is a weight class much like 135 that has some good fighters. Crawford, Errol Spence going up to 154, but where there are some fights for him to be made. There's some contenders. I think he is the future. He's one of the guys who's going to be the future of this division. Today we had some news, by the way. Canelo throwing some shade at Ryan Garcia. Well, I wouldn't call it throwing some shade. I think he just spoke honestly, saying that Ryan Garcia, well, he's messing around much more than he is training, and that he's kind of wasting his talent a little bit. It's hard to disagree with Canelo. He sees what he sees. He's trained with Garcia, and that's what he says, and that's what he says. I will tell you this much, is that Garcia, this isn't so much as an excuse as a reality. Garcia has become a big kind of social media type of a person, and he's more than just boxing, at least to himself. Every person is more than just boxing, but Garcia seems to have other venues that he can go towards to kind of grow his career, grow his brand. He doesn't need the boxing anymore. Not really. He'll always be a boxer, a hot shot type of a deal, but he's not like Canelo. Canelo had no choice. Sometimes it's not fair. Ryan Garcia grew up in America. By the time he was 18 years old, he was already big, right? Canelo was, fighting out of, I don't know what city he's from. Let's say Guadalajara or whatever. He was fighting out of, he turned pro when he was like 15, fighting grown-ass men. We're talking about completely different lifestyles, completely different motivations. One guy wants to eat the next day. One guy, is having an existential crisis because, the fame is getting to his head or whatever, some anxiety from. It's just completely different personality, completely different position in life. It's almost not possible to compare. Like I said, I don't believe Canelo necessarily said was necessarily wrong, but it was just, it was from his perspective. It's probably true. It's probably true too. We all know, I think Holyfield said that it's hard to wake up at 5 a.m. to go jogging when you slept on silk pillow sheets. That's that. Claressa Shields yesterday lost her MMA fight. Lost her first professional fight in God knows how long. Yeah, she's going to need a lot more work. She's getting better, but based on her first MMA fight, I knew already that Claressa Shields needs a lot of work to be competitive in MMA. She's not a power puncher in boxing, so, she has a bunch of things not going for her in MMA, except for the fact that she's a quick learner, which we'll see. She looked decent. I think she lost this round 3. I think it was split decision. It was 2 rounds to 1 on one judge's scorecard and 2 rounds to 1 on 2 other judges' scorecards going against her. So a split decision loss. She's still expected to box on December 11th, which is crazy. But again, I wish her luck. It was sad to see her lose, but this kind of stuff happens. Yeah, so guys, that's gonna do it for me. That's going to do it for me for this week. I'll talk about the fights on a Sunday probably. I know I didn't have a Sunday show. I kind of just meshed everything together in one. Well, it was a slow week. I felt like if I had just the post-fight on Stevenson, then this episode would be a little bit short. Instead, I chose to combine them. I think it's made for a better listening experience. All right, that's going to do it for me. It's over.
I'm going to go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong man, good boy, just.